Good evening. We are back to the study of the Spirit's book. Today, we are going to discuss the last item of law of destruction, which is capital punishment, which is always a difficult subject, complex subject to discuss. We discussed in the past that law of destruction is a natural law, is one of God's law, and destruction happens for the renewal, for the rebuild, to bring better conditions for humankind and for the globe in general. Whenever the destruction is human-made, it's when it becomes a problem, because we go against the natural law. So let's talk a little bit about capital punishment, which is an interesting subject. Okay, can you read, Philip? 760.
Capital punishment. Will the death penalty ever disappear from human legal codes? The death penalty will disappear over the course of time, and when it does, its eradication will mark progress of the human race. When people become more enlightened, the death penalty will be completely abolished across the globe, and humans will no longer need to be judged by humans. This time is still a long way off. The social progress already made leaves much to be desired, but it would be unfair for modern society not to recognize the progress that has been successfully made. We should think in terms of restrictions on capital punishment and the crimes for which it is handed down in most advanced nations. If we compare the measures with which the law handles the accused and the humanity with which they are treated, even when found guilty in these countries, with the methods of criminal procedure used in the recent past, the progress of the human race is obvious. Should I read the comment on the side?
No, I'll read the comment on the side that I added there so I could remember. Let's put that capital punishment in perspective, right? This was 1857 to 1860, depending if it was in the first edition or not. At that time, death penalty was present and legal in probably all countries in the world, in the vast majority of the countries, maybe in all of them. I was doing some research on death penalty, and I found out that interesting enough, in the United States in 1857, there was one state that abolished death penalty, which was Michigan. It was the only state in the US that abolished death penalty at the time that this book was written. In the UK, death penalty existed, but they were changing the laws to eliminate that death penalty for minor crimes, which what they considered at the time minor crimes. So death penalty will still exist in the UK until the 1960s, if I'm not wrong. In France, the death by guillotine still existed, and the death penalty still existed for most of the serious crimes again, right? And the most serious crime for death penalty is treason. All countries and until today. Just as I found out researching today that in many countries in the world, death penalty it still exists in the law for treason, including Brazil, surprising enough for me. Now, yeah, the note that I got here is that in 1977, only 16 countries have totally abolished the death penalty. Today, that number has risen to 108. So more than half of the world abolished the death penalty, and more than 2/3 are abolitionist in law or practice, meaning it's not practice. And it's the case of Brazil. I don't remember the last time anyone in Brazil was killed. But in developed countries, which I mentioned last week, that the United States would be the only developed country, actually it's not. It's legal in Japan and in Singapore also. But no one has been executed in Japan or Singapore for many, many years. Less than 20 countries executed people last year for different reasons through the death penalty. The largest one by far is China, which has more than 1,000 people. And then most of the Arab countries, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, they have death penalty and are using it. United States, obviously. But besides these countries, some African countries, and it's difficult to get information on the African countries because sometimes they have death penalty, but it's not in the law, it's done outside, or so it's not easy to get information there. But what I'm just saying here is the spirits were telling us that the death penalty would disappear over the course of time, at a time when it was present everywhere. And you see 150 years later that it's a small number of countries that still have the death penalty. Again, we're talking here about legal death penalty, okay? That is in the laws of the country and is used by the country. Because if a country doesn't use the death penalty any longer and it's still present, we cannot say that the country, has the death penalty. And this applies. A lot of countries in the Caribbean have death penalty, like Bahamas, some Kitts and some Nevis and others, that they have the death penalty in their legislation, but they don't use it. So it's the same case with Brazil, right? The only case in Brazil that you can be condemned to death is treason. And, I haven't heard any case in Brazil for the past forever years. So the thing the spirits are telling us here also is that, well, actually what Kardec saying is that how humanity handles it, the accused and the punishment is also changing, right? And I was studying a little bit about the prison system, right? Prisons that have existed forever, right? But in the ancient times, and until not far from us today, maybe 300, 400, or 200 years, prisons were to hold prisoners until they were either enslaved or executed. There were not punishment to, like we have nowadays, that you are condemned to stay 20 years in prison or life in prison. That didn't exist until very recently. So this is an evolution. Again, the quality of the prisons is a completely different story that, of course, we know that the quality of the prisons in the majority of the world, including here and other countries, is very poor, to say the least, right? When we don't talk about other things happening. But I think that all of this is to remind us that the law is of progress, that the end of punishing guilty individuals with the death penalty will happen. And we can see that it will happen because in 200 years, very few countries in the world still have it. It may take another 200 years, I don't know, but eventually it won't exist anymore in the world because we will learn to deal differently with the punishment of guilty individuals. And again, how we treat them and how we deal with them, that's something that we are going to be studying later in this chapter here. Any comments, questions? No? Okay.
761. The law of self-preservation gives human beings the right to protect their own lives. Aren't we simply exercising this right when we eliminate a dangerous member of society? There are other means of protecting yourselves from dangerous individuals than killing them. You should open the door of repentance for criminals rather than closing it to them.
Okay. So now here, we should start talking about the consequences of the death penalty on the spirits that are killed, right? If the spirit is guilty, the individual is guilty, and he or she is executed, what's the reaction of the spirit on the other side? It could be some different ones, right? Desire of revenge, and now they are free because they no longer have a physical body. They are free to chase those that have caused, those that they blame for them being executed. They can become prey of spirits that will enslave them, like we read in the book Liberation, right? They can, if they have no regret for what they did, and they were guilty and have no regret, they have an opportunity and the freedom to continue doing it on the other side without the restraints of the physical body. So there is no, in terms of the spirit, there is no positive consequence of executing an individual that has committed crimes, even the worst possible crimes. On the contrary, if we imprison them, and if we can create, and that's what humanity has to work on, a prison that offers decent human living conditions, this spirit has many, many years to repent, to learn, to reassess, and it could transform, like many stories that we hear from prisoners that have changed while they were in prison, right, with the opportunity. So it's a blessed opportunity for the criminals. It opens the door to repentance, as the Spirit tells us here, rather than closing it to them. Because sending them back to the spiritual world does not open the door to repentance. Open the door for different things depending on the state of mind of the spirit, but gives them freedom, because they are free from their physical body and they can act on their freedom in things that can be harmful to them and to incarnate ones. Okay?
Only the word in itself declares the intention of the system that uses it. It's a capital punishment. So there is no intention of protect the society. There is no intention of correct and try to educate the individual. The intention is to punish. So the question of contact not even apply, because it's a punishment system, not a corrective system, not a protective system of the society.
Yeah, and it's it appeals to our primitive instincts, right, to destroy the enemy. It's something that we bring from the instinct, the animal times, right? When we have an enemy, we just try to destroy it, right? So that's what the death penalty brings to us, right? What we still carry with it. Of course, we can discuss the different aspects and different reasons, but in the end, it's still our primitive state prevailing over our moral evolution. Okay. All right.
762.
Yeah.
While the death penalty may one day be banished in civilized society, was it not necessary in more primitive times? Necessary is not the right word. Human beings always think that something is necessary when they cannot find anything better. As they become enlightened, they understand justice and injustice more clearly and reject the abuses committed during ignorant times, all in the name of justice.
Yeah, as we evolve, we should know better, right? As we become enlightened. The question is interesting, right? That Kardec asked, was it not necessary? We go to the primitive times, right? How can we defend our families or our property, the surroundings, by killing the enemies? But that was before, even before we had laws. Now, when we become using laws, you go from the time of the ancient Egypt civilization and you find the death penalty there, right? We don't know before that the death penalty existing legally. But again, the concept of prisoners at that time did not exist, because your enemy, you killed or you enslave it. So that was how we thought at that time. But that's not, when the Spirit said necessary is not the right word, we think that something is necessary because we don't know a better alternative. So we justify the actions because we don't know better in the end. And as we understand today the necessity of the evolution of us as eternal spirits and the importance of the reincarnation and how much we can learn and evolve while we are incarnated, we should always try to use the opportunity to re-educate these criminals without allowing them to be part of society, as we are going to see here later. Because if they are a danger to themselves or to society, we have the responsibility to protect them and protect us by isolating them, and that's where prisons are necessary. But of course, you know, we know that prisons, the way most of prisons are, they don't re-educate. They sometimes cause it more harm than good for some individuals with minor crimes. But that's a problem that society as a whole has to work and improve it. It's the solution of using the death penalty is not the right solution. It's the solution of trying to get rid of a problem that we don't know how to solve it, right? Okay.
763. Is the restriction of the number of cases in which the death penalty is enforced an indication of progress in civilization? Is there any doubt? Are you not revolted when you read about the human massacres that were once carried out in the name of justice and often in honor of God? What about the torture inflicted on the condemned and even on the accused to coerce a confession for crimes that they often had not committed. If you had lived during those times, you would have thought that this was all very natural. And if you had been a judge, you probably would have done the same. What seems right in one time is barbaric in another. Only God's laws are eternal, while societal laws change as human beings progress. They will continue to change until they are in harmony with God's laws.
So Kardec asked this question at a time when the death penalty was being restricted in Europe at that time for minor crimes, because they had death penalty in the UK in the 18th century if you stole livestock from your neighbor. And if you're caught, there was death penalty for that. And so basically death penalty for any crime that was considered to be a little more serious, right? If you read the book Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, you see that he was sent to prison for stealing a loaf of bread, right? For 20 years in prison for stealing a loaf of bread. And that was the 19th century. So the death penalty at that time was already being used to in more extreme cases only. And the spirits tells us here that as we evolve, we are going to abolish these barbaric laws that seemed right in one time, and in other times will seem barbaric. And when we look at the Roman times, when we went to the circus to party on the burning or giving the victims to the animals to be eaten alive, to lions, etc., it was a party. We look at it as barbaric today, right? Probably civilization in 200, 300 years will look at some things we do today and think that they are barbaric. Because the laws, human laws change as we evolve. And the Spirit tells us, you will continue to change until they are in complete harmony with God's laws. When we are all following God's laws without any issues, there will no longer be needed human laws, right? Because if the laws of God, perfect laws, are being followed, human laws become not necessary. Again, this is very, very far away from where we are today. We still need a lot of human laws to control ourselves. We can see at catastrophes and like hurricanes, the destruction, and then how we behave after, stealing things and reacting in our inferior instincts to see why human laws are still very important. But as we progress, human laws progress also, and we will be approaching God's laws that are perfect and unchangeable. Okay? Questions? Okay. You're on mute, Philip, for some reason.
764. Jesus said, "Those who take up the sword shall perish by the sword." Are these words the recognition of the law of retaliation? Is the death penalty enforced on a murderer an application of this law? Be careful. Like so many others, you have misinterpreted the meaning of these words. The only good retaliation is God's justice, because God applies it. You are all enduring this retribution at all times because you are punished for your wrongdoings in this life or in another. Those who have caused their fellow beings to suffer will be placed in a situation where they will suffer what they cause others to endure. This is the true meaning of Jesus's words. He has also said, "Forgive your enemies." And he taught you to pray that God may forgive your trespasses as you forgive those who have trespassed against you, meaning exactly proportionate to your forgiveness toward others. Try to absorb the full meaning of those words.
Yes, in the Old Testament, you find the punishment, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, right? Meaning that you should exact revenge in the same way that you were hurt. Jesus comes and tells us, forgive your enemies, love one another. When Jesus says, those who take up the sword shall perish by the sword, he was just teaching us about the law of cause and effect. He was not telling us to take matters on our own hands. Jesus never said anything in that regard. He was just saying, there is a law of cause and consequence. We are going to have faced the consequence of our own doings, either in this life or in another life, physical life. We are eternal spirits. The punishment here, Kardec asks, isn't the death penalty an application of this law? It's to challenge the spirits to explain the teachings of Jesus, and they come with an explanation that we take the words literally and apply it to our physical lives, and that's where we make the mistake. We have to apply it to our eternal spirit state, right? The law of cause and consequence, which is one of the natural laws. So once we understand that, we understand that what Jesus truly meant is that we are going to have to face the consequence of our actions. There was the case when the soldiers came to pick up Jesus, right? That when Judas betrayed Jesus and the soldiers came to pick up, that Peter took the sword and cut the ear of one soldier. And Jesus told him, put away your sword, and he picked up the ear and healed the soldier, right? That's when he said, those who take up the sword shall perish by the sword. That's when he used that phrase. But what he was saying was, of course, in a more ample meaning of us as eternal spirits. Okay, you'll find these passages that were marked here in Matthew 26:52, 5:44, and 6:14. These three passages: those who take up the sword shall perish by the sword. Forgive your enemies, and God may forgive you your trespasses as you forgive those who have trespassed against you. So, can Jesus be contradicting himself? We know he cannot. As a perfect spirit, he will never contradict himself. So, if he's not contradicting himself, after that, the reason is we haven't fully understood what he meant. And that's what he meant. The law of cause and consequence. Okay? All right. Last one.
765. What should we think of the enforcement of the death penalty in God's name? This takes God's place in the administration of justice. Those who do this show how far they are from understanding God, and how much they still have to atone. Capital punishment is a crime when applied in God's name, and those who enforce it will answer for it just like any other murderer.
So if you prefer here, you can use in the name of God. It's the same. In the name of God is a more formal version of in God's name. Of course, if you are killing in the name of God, you are committing a crime that is probably more serious than if you are committing a crime without having any spiritual belief. Because when you think that this is all there is our only life, and there is no spiritual belief, by killing someone else, you are just trying to help society get rid of someone that is a danger to society, a danger to yourself. When you are doing that in the name of God, you should know better. Those that misinterpret the religious words and persecute others for difference of opinion, the fanatics that use their fanaticism to punish in the name of God, they are going to face more serious consequences. But it is murder, like the spirits tell us here, right? It's important for us to remember that when you have a spiritual knowledge and you are misusing the spiritual knowledge or misinterpreting it, you are more responsible, because you should apply yourself better, learn better before going out there and causing harm to others, because that's not God's law in any religion. You won't find any religion where it says that God is tells you to kill others that do not follow their religion. This is human misinterpretation of religious teachings. Okay, this was the last one on the law of destruction and on death penalty. Any final questions, comments? Okay, now we move to Chapter 7, Law of Society.
What's that?
We live in society, so law of society is a natural law. We need to live in society, and that's what we are going to discuss here. It's not a very long chapter.
Shall I?
Yep.
766. Is social life founded in nature? Certainly. God made human beings to live in a society. God has given human beings speech and the other faculties they need for a social life for a purpose.
That's very interesting, right? That the spirits, the first answer that they give to us is God has given human beings speech. If we were not supposed to live amongst others, why would we be able to speak, right? There's no need to communicate with others if we're going to live in isolation. So the need for social life is a natural law, is a law of God, because we grow together, we evolve as individuals by living in society. We cannot live by ourselves, and we are going to see this in the following questions, right? Because a perfect spirit could live by itself, but a perfect spirit, one of the characteristics of a perfect spirit is to exist to help others. So a perfect spirit that could live by itself would never live by itself.
That would not be perfect because it would not be following God's laws.
Exactly. Yeah, it would not be a perfect spirit. Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
767. Does absolute isolation conflict with the law of nature? Yes, since human beings instinctively seek associations and all people are meant to help advance progress by helping one another.
Okay, so what is to live in isolation? Is to try to avoid problems, right? Try to avoid the difficulties that the world brings to us. And what is this? It's being selfish, right? Because who are you helping by isolating yourself from society? You are helping society? No. You are helping yourself? No. You're missing an opportunity to learn from the others because we don't know everything. So it conflicts with the law, with the natural law, right? Actually, the question here conflicts with the natural law, not the law of nature. Because we are spirits that progress by living in society, by interacting with others. We see this here in the physical world, and we see this in the spiritual world. When we read about the spiritual world, you always find spirits living amongst other spirits. So it's a natural law that is not a natural law of the incarnated world. It's a natural law that governs the law of the spirits in the universe. Okay.
768.
Yeah.
In seeking out society, do human beings only yield to a personal motivation, or is there a greater providential purpose? Humans must progress. They cannot do it alone because they do not possess all faculties and need contact with other humans. They become animal-like and stunted when isolated. No one possesses the complete range of faculties. Through social union, human beings complete one another and mutually secure their well-being. Because they need one another, they have been created for living in society and not in isolation.
Yes, so the motivation for us, for humans to live in society is to progress. We cannot progress alone. We can do some work alone, and we sometimes need to work, and we'll see that later in another questions. But we need to live in society for us to interact with society to progress. When we isolate ourselves, like the spirits say here, we become animal-like and stunted when we are isolated. We lose the ability to evolve, because you can only reach to a certain point when you are all by yourself. Even in the world today, when more and more you can live in isolation but be connected to others through the internet and the Zooms of this world, the need for human interaction, personal interaction, is still very important, because it helps us deal with a series of our problems and limitations, right? So to isolate from society and continue living connected to society through electronic means, it's better than completely isolate yourself and do not have any contact, but it still doesn't answer all our needs. We still have needs to personal interaction with others to be able to continue our progress. Okay.
It is interesting, like for the sequence of the laws, right? We already covered law of reproduction, law of labor, law of self-preservation, and none of those things lead to the conclusion that society is one of the laws. We cannot reproduce by yourself. You need to have someone else reproduce it to you. You cannot, there's no sense of laboring only for yourself. The sense of that, as we understand in this book, is label defines as something useful. I mean, there is, if you're gonna do something useful, it has to be for someone else. So all those laws that you already covered declares to us very clearly that we need to be in society in order to learn, in order to progress, in order to procreate, in order to work, and everything else that you already saw it before.
Yeah, yeah, yes. Kardec, of course, Kardec builds the book in it's not random order, but it's it's in an order that makes sense. And the last law that of God's law that we're going to study is the law of justice, love, and charity, which is a combination of all the laws we studied before when we get there. So yes, absolutely. Again, and the other laws lose their meaning if we are living in isolation, right?
They lose all their meaning.
Yeah. If you live alone in an island, what is right and what is wrong, right? We can question that, right? Okay.
$769.
Yeah.
As a rule, we understand that social life is founded in nature as well as all preferences. Why is absolute isolation wrong if an individual finds satisfaction in it, and since all predilections are found in nature? This satisfaction is selfish. There are those who find satisfaction in getting drunk. Do you approve of them? God is not happy with lives that are doomed to not being useful to anyone.
Okay, so the absolute isolation, like the spirits say here, is selfish, right? Because we are not being useful to society, and we are not using society to help us progress. When it says God is not happy with lives that are doomed to not being useful to anyone, the natural law is a law that dictates that we are here to progress. And if we are not applying ourselves to evolve, we are going against the natural law, and we will have to face consequences. That's the God is not happy part of it, right? God is never happy or unhappy because God is perfect. So there is no happiness or unhappiness in God. But it's the words that we used at that time and I still use today, right? But the natural laws are perfect. God is perfect. So there is no happiness or unhappiness there. It's just perfection. But the cause and consequence there is. And if we are wasting our time on this incarnation, we are creating consequences for ourselves, serious consequences. Okay.
770.
Yep.
What should we think of those who live in complete seclusion to escape negative contact with the world? It is twice as selfish. But if they endure such seclusion as a form of atonement through difficult self-deprivation, is it not praiseworthy? The best of all atonements is to do more good than evil. They avoid one wrongdoing, but fall into another, since they disregard the law of love and charity.
So the spirits are very clear here. If we isolate ourselves to escape the negative contact with the world, it's twice as selfish. And what are we escaping? We are trying to escape from our inferior tendencies, because they are going to be exposed when we live in society. And so we are trying to avoid to work on our imperfections just by not having the opportunity to be exposed to them. So that's what the Spirit says is twice as selfish. And if we are using it as a form of atonement, we are doing it the wrong way, the Spirit tells us. What we have to do is to work to help others, to do more good than evil, to work on our imperfections by living in society and by being exposed to the issues and problems that we have in society. There is this tale of the two brothers that one isolated himself, that for him, he said that he wanted to isolate himself from the world to acquire patience, to acquire fully patience. And the other one stayed in the society and said, I want to learn patience by interacting with society. And then some years later, the brother that went to isolate himself come back to society and tells his brother, I was able to fully achieve patience in my time of isolation. And then the brother said, well, let's see when you are exposed. And then something, I don't remember exactly what happened, and he loses his patience very quickly. Actually, he never acquired patience to begin with, right? So isolating is just avoiding. It's not really solving anything. For us to deal with our imperfections, to us to deal with our shortcomings, we need to face them and we need to expose them, right? You are never going to know if you are learning your qualities if you don't expose yourself to the risks of testing yourself, right? So it is isolation. It's never going to solve our issues, our personal issues. It's only going to aggravate them.
What happens to these people when they die of living in isolation, like monks?
Yeah, it was a good point that you brought the monks, because there are exceptions that we didn't mention here. There are some few monks that are able to, through isolation and meditation, elevate the vibrational level of the world. But these are not isolating themselves to escape humanity. They are isolating themselves to help humanity. That's the way they elevate themselves. Again, these are the exceptions. You have a lot of monks that isolate themselves and are not doing anything good. But these are the exceptions, the ones that help. So they are helping society. They are cleaning the air of the planet, the vibrational levels of the planet. So they are working for society, even in isolation. And actually there is a
877-600-0503 to service this computer.
There is a question here that talks about those that need to isolate themselves to do some work. You know, they need to it's not remove themselves from society, but some types of work need peace and quiet, right? Work that they are doing to help society, but they cannot be in a place where everything happens. They need to be isolated. Kardec did that when he was preparing the Gospel according to Spiritism. He left Paris, isolate himself to work on the book, following the advice from the spirits, for him to be able to fully bring that work that is so important, right? Because it has the religious, the moral aspect. So that is a different, right? The isolation to contribute to society, it's something that you contribute to society. So it's right. Daniela.
When they talk about isolation, that would be the entire incarnation here, like the whole life in one incarnation?
Not necessarily. So they're talking here at that time of Kardec. You had those that the religious people, right, that went into convents, went into these places of reclusion and isolate themselves from society completely, right? So that was more what the spirits and Kardec were talking at the time, but not necessarily, right? You know, you decide that you are going to isolate yourself from society for 10 years. You are wasting 10 years of your life. It doesn't need to be the whole life, but I don't know if that's exactly what you meant.
No, it's not really explained because for me it could be a little bit radical if it's just a moment in a person's life. Like, let's say a person lives 80 years or 70 years, and for a period of time, this person is seeking isolation. Like, even if at that time, people who were joining communities, like religious groups, like monks or nuns, they were not isolated. They were living together. They had to share meals. They had to share labor. They had to share chores, like rules. So they were not isolated, actually. They were living out of a family or out of this societal construction, a mother, father, kids, you know, grandmother, grandfather, I don't know. But they were not necessarily alone. And my other point is, some people, for example, we just came from the capital punishment, right? Like, how is the best way to deal with people who put our lives in danger, right? Before we killed them or enslaved them. And then not so long ago, as you said, we put them in imprisonment to try to teach or correct or keep us safe from their harm. So I wonder if for certain people, some isolation at some point, not the whole life, could be better than spiritually better for the person and for society than living together and creating more harm than good. I'm not saying that I'm refuting what they're saying. I understand what they say, but being alone and having the time sometimes to process the harm you have been doing, actually, if it's the case. Because if you're doing good, you're doing well, and I don't think people are going to find isolation, right? Like, it could be, but if you are causing so much harm, sometimes being alone could be interesting. That's why that's what my question is. Do they mean a whole incarnation alone?
No. So there are some parts here. First, those that they leave society to live in convents and things like that, they are living in other societies. That's not the case, because they're not living in isolation. So that's not what they're talking about here. In terms of, in the end, you have to think of the conscience. What's the intent? What's really the intent? Is this a selfish intent? Because if you are avoiding society because you think that if you stay in society, you are going to cause more harm to society, you are not working on your problems. You are running away from your problems, right? Because to deal with your problems, you have to face the problems. To isolate yourself for a reason, let's say you need to recharge your energies, you need to stay away from society for some time, and it depends on how much time you need. Again, it goes back to what's really the intention there, and what does your conscience tells you, right? In the book, I Came Back, Voltaire, by Brother Jacob, which is unfortunately not translated into English. He goes back to the spiritual world, And he's struggling there in the spiritual world to regain his understanding and to find his own light. And it's recommended to him that he goes on a course away from everyone that he knows for a period of time. Again, he's with other people, but not connected to anyone that he knows, because he needed time away from everyone that he knew to focus on his learning and acquiring the light that he was looking for. So it was important for him. I think he stayed there for a couple of years. So again, what's the intention behind? What are you really doing with the isolation? Is it something selfish? Is it something that is going to help you/society? Because if you are thinking of only helping yourself selfishly, then it's a problem. So again, it's a case-by-case thing. And the spirits are not saying, they're saying here that isolation in a general sense of running away from the problems is the issue. Running away from society and running away from the problems. The specific cases are specific cases, right? You can find exceptions, like we find exceptions everywhere.
I think there's three things here. One, you can think of individual or communal isolation. It is still isolation. If the group of us here, SG and Y, decides to isolate ourselves in a mountain, the Pittsfields, do not contaminate ourselves with the rest of society, it's communal isolation. Individual, each individual has a common objective of the whole group, still isolation. Two, intermittent, short periods of isolation, as you said, the therefore reflection is a very good thing. Jesus did it. There is a book, I forgot his name, The Desert, what is his name again? Jose Roger Rossellio. From Paraíba.
Yes, I'll get it.
Yeah, the need of the desert is the name of the book.
Rossandro.
That suggests that we take that short, intermittent periodically time to get into the desert, with an analogy, of course, to be alone, naked with God. So that's a good thing to do. But again, it's short, intermittent, and has a noble objective. Let's assume that I am a pedophile. Let's assume that I do not see any means of recovering myself in this incarnation. And I judge the only way that I can protect children is by isolation myself. I think it's acceptable. I'm going to have to deal with this problem, and I'm going to have to deal with this problem being exposed to children eventually. But if my conscience leads me to believe that I cannot recover myself now, I think it's something that it's doable and acceptable. It's still, I don't know, not the solution of the problem, but it's the only one that I find at the moment in my life. So the intention is everything. So I take case by case, intention by intention. But if a group of people seeks to isolate themselves because they think they are superior, it's still isolation. It's just not individual, it's communal.
Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to this next week. Our time is up.
Wow.
Yep, that was quick, fast, right?
Yeah, went too fast.
So this Saturday, we have a very interesting lecture on the United States Spiritist Federation. I highly recommend. It's from Dr. Sonia Doi, from the president of the International Medical Spiritist Association. And she's going to talk about faith and cellular responses. So she's going to review the concepts of faith, the placebo effect, and the difference between healing and cure. Also, she will discuss faith's positive and negative impact on physical health and address the mechanisms of mind control and cellular responses based on scientific findings and knowledge from Spiritism. She's a very good, she has a lot of knowledge in terms of the medical area, and she's the one that promotes every year the medical seminar, the Spiritist medical seminar that happens every year in October, November. So this Saturday at 11 a.m., I highly recommend for you to watch it through the United States Spiritist Federation YouTube page or the Facebook page. Next week on the book club, we are going to discuss chapter 3 of Hail Christ, the book we are discussing. This Sunday is the third Sunday of the month. We are going to study the Medium's book, and taking the opportunity here, mark your calendars on February 5th. Here at SGNY, we are going to have a seminar or a discussion on mediumship from 2 to 4 p.m. Organized by the Tri-State Spiritist Federation. So this is a Sunday, February 5th, and it's going to be presential only from 2 to 4 p.m. here at SGNY, okay?
In person?
In person, yes. Sorry.
On February 5th, okay.
Yeah. So, Carol, can you do our final prayer?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, John. Thank you, Elmo. Thank you, Philip, for reading, and everyone for participating. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we give thanks to be together for our studies of the Spirit's book, our chapter involving the law of destruction and the law of society. Capital punishment and the death penalty will eventually disappear when it is abolished in countries around the world. Humans will create greater opportunities for criminals to be educated and rehabilitated. As we evolve, and we are evolving, more elevated forms of justice will prevail within the societal laws. These will be more aligned with God's laws. The higher law of cause and consequence will prevail as we are eternal spirits. It will occur in this life or in another lifetime. Humans are societal beings and progress in society, communities, and families. Absolute isolation, being alone to escape from contact within the world, can be selfish and is not necessarily a means of progressing. It depends on one's intent and objective. Sometimes it is helpful to take a break, and we do need a break at some time, to reflect and to be away from regular routines and to perhaps be more closely aligned with nature. We are grateful to the spiritual benefactors, the good spirits, the helpers, the guidance that we have from our mentors as well. We are grateful for all we have received and learned this evening, hoping that we can put into practice this wisdom that we have received. May we continue throughout the week with our prayers, with our studies in mindfulness, knowing that we are never alone, never isolated completely. There is always assistance as we do our part, and we put into action proactively those things in which we are receiving guidance for. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us, knowing that this will align our heart and our mind to be able to navigate more reasonably in this world. We know that the spiritual principles, the higher guidance, will be of great assistance to us as we put it into practice. May we be of greater service, and may we be in harmony to be more charitable, more loving, and more helpful to all those surrounding us and those who are near and dear to us. We close now and ask ourselves to be beacons of light, going forth in safety and protection, going forth to our family, friends, loved ones, and coworkers. May we be blessed by the light of Christ within us, the love, the peace, and the goodwill toward all. So be it.